The long wait for Nimona is finally over. It actually almost never even existed as a movie. It started out as a webcomic originally and then got picked up as a graphic novel, and then it went into production as a film with Blue Sky Studios. But then Blue Sky Studios got shut down and it seemed like everything that they were working on was never going to see the light of day. But now it's finally come out as a 3D animated film with a very distinctive 2D graphic treatment. This was honestly one of the funnest and best movies that I have seen in a long time. And this should go without saying, but possible spoilers ahead. The way they've combined the medieval environment with futuristic tech makes for a really interesting setting for the movie. It kind of gives you a feeling of nostalgia, like you're watching one of the old 2D Disney princess fairy tale type movies with castles and knights and royalty, but with a twist. And that twist is things like TV and broadcast media, and the kinds of technological trappings we're familiar with our modern advancements. It's so cool right from the beginning how we start with the scroll unrolling and this very medieval, old school kind of retelling of the history in the style of illuminated manuscripts. It feels very fairy tale-ish. And then we're in these castle grounds with a village, but with all these kinds of sci-fi flying vehicles and billboards, lasers shining into the air, TV crews and huge screens. It's a really cool juxtaposition that works super well. To enhance the feeling of it being based on a graphic novel, they've used a treatment where it actually looks similar to cel shading, so there's no soft gradient between lights and darks and no ambient occlusion used to stay in keeping with that graphic 2D shaded style. You'll see that the texturing and details are also kept relatively simple, and everything is extremely stylized, from shape language to textures and geometry. A really interesting detail about the treatment for the graphics is that when objects or characters are close, we see them in all their details, at least in as much detail as the treatment allows. But the further away they get, the less detail there is. And this isn't just by chance or because naturally as things get further away our eyes don't pick up that detail. They've literally changed the textures and the geometry to make the objects and characters simpler. The inspiration for this is threefold. To reflect that graphic novel treatment, as that's the graphic treatment used in the graphic novel that this is based off of, where the creator, Stevenson, often implied detail rather than depicting it all there on the page. Also to create perspective and depth, as, like I mentioned before, objects naturally start to look less detailed the further away they get, and this was just enhancing that effect. As well as, and this is the most interesting, to support the underlying story that the closer we get to people, the more we get to know them, the more details and nuances we see in them. When we look at people from far away, we just see the impression of them. We don't see who they really are until we close that distance and get closer to them. That's pretty much what the movie is all about. Preconceived notions about people based on what they look like, and the prejudices that are only destroyed once you really get to know someone. The characters are designed as these archetypes. The supposed hero Sir Ambrosius Goldenloin, with his pure and warm coloring, whites and golds, blonde, perfectly styled hair, upright posture, Dorito chip body with those crazy wide shoulders and tiny waist, square jaw so sharp you could cut someone in half with it. And then we have Lord Ballister, who's a stereotypical villain in appearance, with his dark coloring, scar on his eye and his bad dude pointy goatee and moustache, widow's peak hairline, slimmer and more wiry frame, and all around sharper features. Nimona is pretty much always in red hues, except for a few isolated incidents where she's trying to go on the proper DL. But red is a color associated with danger and evil. She's got pointy teeth and eyes that shine red or reflect light like an animal when the light hits them, and at times some pretty scary looking expressions. All of these are the archetypes of what people assume characters are, like a villain looks villainous, a hero looks heroic, and that's what people assume they are just from looking at them. But this whole movie completely subverts those tropes. Color also plays a huge part in the storytelling. The people who are supposed to be the good guys are in the colors typically associated with goodness and purity. Goldenloin, the director and the knights, and everything in the palace, it's all white and golden, and the lighting is very bright and warm toned. Like I mentioned before, Nimona is always this pinky reddish color, and Ballister is also colored in darker tones and wearing black. And the lair that they chill out in is dimly lit with usually reddish lighting, since red and black are colors associated with villains and badness. But of course, above and beyond that, color is used for setting the mood and showing people what sort of emotions are going on in this scene. For example, here, where Nimona and Ballister are vibing and they feel comfy cozy with each other and it's all warm and fuzzy, we have this warm golden light emanating from the TV, representing that warmth and comfort they now feel with each other. But when Nimona falls asleep, That warm, cozy light is interrupted with this cold blue light coming from the computer. And this is where the threat to Nimona and Ballister's relationship comes in, where Golden Loin is messaging Ballister, and this is the trigger moment of Ballister basically betraying Nimona, or the lead up to that happening. And that is anticipated or foreshadowed by this cold blue light that overtook the warm golden light that they were previously bathed in. Light and shadow also play a really big role in storytelling, and it's very cleverly used to portray how the characters are being perceived and treated and how they feel. When a character's in shadow, it's at times when they're feeling ostracized and alone. They're not accepted in society for who they are. Like here where Nimona is in the shadows, but when Glorith comes along and accepts her for who she is, she steps out into the light to signify that acceptance. There's also really strong shape language used in all the designs, in the environment as well as the characters. Nimona's design makes use of more smooth and rounded shapes, no matter what form she's taken. Her whole design reflects the fluidity and constant motion of her character, and it's also illustrated in how she's animated, constantly moving with so much barely contained energy and really dynamic. Ballister is more compact and contained, with a geometric and square sort of shape language to his design, pointier features in keeping with his villain look, and Golden Loin is also more rigid and geometric in design, leaning more towards the triangular shapes, the typically hero silhouette, and also signifying that he's more rigid in character and personality. He sees things in black and white. Neither of them are as fluid and organic as the more laid-back Nimona. For me, the star of the show was definitely Nimona's expressions and the flexibility of her rig in terms of her face. There are so many great moments in her acting that just had so much character and comedy in them, and they were perfectly timed and perfectly posed and expressed, and really felt like it was a graphic novel with all the freedom that comes with being able to break the rules when you're drawing something, as opposed to the limitations you sometimes have with a rig or the rules of reality when working in 3D. This was one of my favorite scenes, when Ballister and Nimona first meet. Her personality is just so effervescent right off the bat, and it comes through so incredibly well in the animation. I love the timing and spacing on this particular part, where Nimona is kneeling on the backwards chair, and then she sort of leaps over it. We've got our two characters in a medium shot so we can clearly see and read their body language. She's nicely silhouetted by this volumetric lighting streaming in from the doorway that she's framed by, and this illustrates that she's our focal point right now, even though they're both framed equally in the shot. We've got some good rim lighting on the edges of her and Ballister so they stand out on this dark background, and her coloring makes her really prominent against the cool-toned room. Both of their lines of action are directed towards each other in a C-curve because this scene is about their interaction and playing off each other in terms of the acting, which is done so freaking well. Nimona starts to straighten up, and you see the action start in her shoulders as they move up and backwards, and her arms start to move as well in response. And then a frame later, her legs start to push up, and we see her arms offset here as she starts to grab the back of the chair. If you're an animator, you know the importance of avoiding twinning. So even if both the arms are ultimately doing the same thing, which is grabbing the back of the chair, they're offset, and we have this overlapping action here where one hand grabs first, the hand furthest from the camera, to avoid muddying the action and blocking our view when the next one grabs the chair. And her elbow is lifted, giving us this negative space so we have a clear silhouette and it's all very easy to read. As opposed to if the elbow was lowered closer to her body like this one, because then we wouldn't see the arm and it would end up making the silhouette quite muddy. Ballister is also strongly posed with a clear silhouette as he stands here in this moving hold. All the movement in this time when Nimona starts to move up is his head and eyes following her movement. His stillness and her movement complement each other so well and allow us to focus on her and really give room for her constant energy. We've got a reversal here in her line of action as it inverts for a dramatic contrast to her previous pose and to counter the balance shifting in the chair, and we're already seeing how dynamic and extra she is in her movements. This moment is also anticipation for her next move, which for some reason is one of my favorite animation moments. I mean, there are a lot in this movie, but this is one of them that stands out. And that's when she springs over the back of the chair, holds in the air as she spins the chair around and then lands so neatly. It's all executed flawlessly and with such amazing timing and spacing. Got a little bit of stretch in her head there as she arcs down, and all that overlapping action in all the various parts of her body and the chair, and the give and take in the chair with her weight as well. As she lands, the chair spins from the forces she's been exerting on it, and she has her leg up on her knee, and in all her poses and action, she's super chilled vibes. Totally comfortable and confident here, and this is a stark contrast to the uptight postures and actions that Ballister displays in his movements. He's totally confused and out of his depth right now, and she's just super laid back. As the chair has turned and her back is to Ballister, she swaps legs, and we have the anticipation there as her body leans forward and her leg compacts a little to gather the energy for the next movement, which is when she pushes off with her leg and shoots across to the other side, and the camera, which has been locked off till now, follows her and pans across. Ballister sidesteps her and his arms lift there, nice arcs as they always should be, and here as Nimona says, really make my resume pop, her face compacts and her eyes close and eyebrows lower to provide a contrast and anticipation for the next expression when she says pop, and her eyes pop open and her mouth opens wide, eyebrows lift, and her hands open up, and that contrast between the two expressions and that anticipation there let this action and expression have a lot more impact. This whole sequence has Nimona dominating. She's leading the action and interaction, and Ballister follows her as she moves around the room like an uncontrollable force of nature. The chair keeps turning with the momentum of her move and weight, but as it turns back to us, she's disappeared. And we see that change in emotional beat from Ballister, where before he was annoyed and confused, but mostly annoyed, and now he's completely confused. And you see the same theory is applied here in that change of expression on his face that they previously did with Nimona's. The face first compacts with anticipation, eyes close and eyebrows lower, before all opening up again in surprise, giving the look of surprise more impact. Nimona says, "Up here." So Ballister starts to look upwards and the camera follows and starts to pan up really quickly, giving us this smooth transition cut to another angle with the same motion. And now we're looking up at her from this over-the-shoulder shot from his perspective, which is basically a worm's eye view, and it's showing us a little more blatantly that she's in control of this situation. Because the low camera angle looking up at a character is showing that character in a position of power over the character that's lower, which is ironic because Nimona wants to be Ballister's sidekick and keeps calling him boss, but she is totally in control here. Then we cut to Nimona's point of view, looking down at Ballister as he says, "What job?" further illustrating his confusion and feeling of powerlessness in this situation because he just doesn't understand what the hell is going on. Apart from this shot where we're looking down at Ballister, or where they do a close-up to get a focus on emotions or expressions for comedic effect, throughout this sequence, they're mostly kept both in the shot, because they're building a rapport between the two characters with the framing, establishing this really beautiful relationship that they're gonna have. The animators did an amazing job of juxtaposing the different personalities and energies between Nimona and Ballister here. In this next shot where Nimona hops back down, lands, and immediately keeps moving as she starts to walk across the box and the camera starts to move in this arc shot as the camera centralizes Nimona's little monologue as she gets more and more excited. And this sequence is notable because she's literally foreshadowing the end of the movie. So that motion of the camera literally orbiting Nimona underlines the importance of what she's saying and the importance of her, even though at this time it seems like she's just talking shit. This whole shot is super dynamic, with all Nimona's action and the destruction of the plate coupled with the motion of the camera. Then she turns and looks over her shoulder at him and says, "Or we could just talk." And it's perfectly punctuated by the utter stillness in this following shot of a close-up of Ballister as he's centered in the frame, perfectly symmetrical and balanced and still with this nonplussed look on his face. And it's such a contrast to Nimona's chaotic energy. And that's why their relationship dynamic also works so well. They play off each other so perfectly and have such distinctive character and personalities. It's hard to remember that they're animated characters and not real people. Nimona in particular is so unique and full of life. The animators play so well with the exaggeration and extremes that animation grants you as a medium. Like here where she's looking at the murder wall and her face is first all excited and cute like she's so in love with the idea of a murder wall. She's got this cute smile on her face and big shiny eyes, and then suddenly she has this really evil look on her face, and there's literally just one in between the two key poses. The transition is so quick, and that surprise of that quick change, that contrast between the two expressions with no anticipation there, gives it a really great comedic effect, which is used a lot in Nimona's animation. I can't stress enough how much I love this movie and how they brought Nimona to life so successfully. She is just so effervescent and full of life, it's almost difficult to remember that she's an animated character and not an actual person or actor. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and it gave you a little more insight into the visual storytelling and what it takes to actually create an amazing animated movie like Nimona. Hit the like button if you liked the video and you actually got this far into it. Subscribe if you want to keep up to date with all my other videos. And thank you so much to my patrons over on Patreon. You guys, as always, are so appreciated. Thanks for watching. Bye!